Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Ignorant Intellectual on Media. Today, I thought we'd do another mixed haul. Seems to be going to probably be mixed hauls from now on. I rarely end up just buying something from one set of locations, whether it's just thrift stores. I always end up buying stuff off Kijiji or Facebook Marketplace. I'm always looking for other places to get stuff as well, and I buy new off Amazon or other locations. Um, So most of them are going to be mixed hauls. That's why you'll see when you look through all the 100+ videos that I have that these type of hauls are being dominated by mixed hauls, where thrift store hauls or private sale hauls are lagging behind. Um, uh, so today I have a bunch of books, a huge load of Blu-rays, and a couple of well, actually one CD. So let's get to it, see how quickly we can get through this stuff. But this is probably another one of those long videos. Some people keep telling me, Scott, you got to make shorter videos. These hour-long videos, nobody's going to watch, right? So, uh, what can I do, right? I guess I could shorten them, right? But half the fun is doing a video. It's more of a vanity project than it is necessarily for other people. But it gives me something to do with my spare time. And Uh, it'll be a resource for my son after I die. If he wants to get to know his dad and what his dad likes and dislikes, he can always go on YouTube and watch these videos, right? So I also have them on a hard drive for him as well. So, um, because I never really told you that. I had him when I was like old, like I'm old, right? So I had him when I was old. So I'll probably be dead by the time he leaves his teens, right? So I set up a bunch of videos for him to watch. Because if your father dies when, let's say, you're 18 or 16 or whatever, and you're 40, right? Um, how much of him are you going to remember, right? So a video is like a slice of time that never goes away, right? So at least I can be in his life in some manner after I raise him, right? So anyway, so let's get to this, and we'll see how it goes. Let's do a few books first, okay? So here's Night by Eli Wiesel. I don't know if you know who Eli Wiesel is, right? He's the winner of the Nobel Peace Prize, but what does that have to do with writing? Nothing really, but his writing is extremely good as well. Now what is he? Is he Polish? No, Transylvania. So Transylvania is Romanian. So he's a Romanian, all right? And so he's in Romania with his wife and his children when the Nazis come in, right? Back in 1944, and they send them all to Auschwitz, right? So he survives, his family doesn't. And this is his recounting of that horror, all right? So if you want like a first-hand account of what went on during the Holocaust, Weisel would be a really good pickup for you, and this book in particular would be a very good pickup for you. It's not a long book; he goes through it quite quickly, but yeah, it'll change you after reading it. All right, so that's that one. All right, how about this one? Darwin's Dangerous Idea: The Evolution and the Meaning and the Meanings of Life by Daniel C. Dennett. All right. So basically, Dennett, who's a scientist, ends up writing in depth about Darwin's, theory of natural selection and what it means in the modern world. It is an extremely good book if you haven't read it. If you want to read, Darwin's no books themselves, one on the theory of evolution or natural selection, and the other one where he's on the Beagle going to is it the Galapagos Islands when he's studying and he starts thinking up these ideas, right? Those two are good, but if you want a modern version of that kind of thing, maybe this book would be of interest to you. All right. And then I went to a thrift store and I found these three books, these three Penguin classics. It seems somebody decided that they didn't want their Russian library or 19th century Russian literature. There was a few more of them, but these were the best condition of the ones. I don't really buy books in bad condition because they're really hard to resell. So I strictly pick up books if I'm going to resell them. They're in like new condition, right? So pretty close to new. They depending on the book. Let's say here's an example of one that isn't perfectly, it's got a bend in the back, right? But it's 1984, so this will sell. This is one of the most popular reading books in the world. All right, so it sells mostly no matter what condition they're in. And Russian literature sells really well as well. Um, but there was like four books, and I only picked up three of them. The fourth one was a Tolstoy book, but it had a big bend in the front cover, and so I didn't pick it up. But three books on Russian literature. So a student probably got rid of his Russian literature collection, and I was there to pick up some of the ones that were left. Dostoevsky's Notes from the Underground. All right. Other than Crime and Punishment, this might be his best work. All right. It also comes with the double as well. Okay. So if you haven't read Notes from the Underground, um, it's more of a confession. So Dostoevsky goes through a bunch of scenarios or whatever. I can't remember exactly. It's been like 30 years, 25 years since I've read this. So a man who is haunted, possessed by his own double. All right, no, that's the other one. So it's basically Dostoevsky writing down his deepest quote beliefs or whatever, right? Then we have Gogol's Dead Souls, which is basically about a guy who goes into a town or a village, and the tax man of the town or village collects taxes from the landowners, depending on how many serfs they have working for them, right? Um, so the more serfs you have working for, the higher your tax is, right? So this guy, the main character in Dead Souls, goes around, and because the census to find out how many serfs are on each, piece of land, is not done all that frequently, what you happen is a situation where some of these serfs will die, right? They no longer exist, right? And and then the landowners are still paying taxes for them, right? Um, so what this guy, he has an ingenious plan. Gogol's such a good mind, right? Where he'll go into a village, a town, or whatever, and he'll start buying these souls. All right, so these quote unquote dead souls, right? So um, and what he'll do is now that he has the claim of these serfs, what he'll do is he'll go to a lending institution and borrow money off these because the lending institution doesn't know that these people are dead, right? So they're of worth, right? So then he'll get a loan off of these, and then he has all this money, right? And then he just takes off, right? So, anyways, it's quite an interesting book if you haven't read it. And the third is Turgenev's Fathers and Sons. All right, so this is another one of the great 19th century Russian novels. I read this, but it's been a long time. What is this? Oh yeah, this book is about nihilism. If you want an introduction on where nihilism comes from, read Turgenev's Fathers and Sons. It's about a boy, or I guess a young man, and a friend of his who goes back to his father's estate and starts espousing nihilism to everybody that everything that they ever believed or grew up on or think is important is pointless, right? So it's quite a good novel, and it was my introduction to the philosophical concept of nihilism, right? So um, read it; it's good. All right, then we got The Hobbit, which is my personal favorite single book in the fantasy genre. It's probably the greatest book of that sort. You have Lord of the Rings that Tolkien wrote afterwards, that trilogy, that Peter Jackson turned into a whole bunch of movies. Um, and Peter Jackson made this one book into three movies as well, so he kind of prolonged that movie, right? Um, but this was one of the first fantasy novels I read, and extremely good. It's basically about a hobbit. Everybody knows this book, right? I don't really have to explain much. He goes on an adventure to go get treasure to give it back to a bunch of dwarfs that was stolen by Smaug, which is an evil dragon, right? So it's quite a fun read. You get introduced to Schmeagol, and The Ring. Um, so, anyways, it was good. And then we have Virginia Woolf, The Waves, basically about six people talking, doing monologues, or what do you call them? Are they monologues? Anyways, they talk to them. They're not talking to anybody, but they're talking to themselves. And Virginia Woolf writes it down in that way. It's all about from childhood. These people grow from childhood up to adulthood and old age or whatever. And Virginia Woolf goes through their thoughts along the way. It's a pretty interesting book. We did those. We did all right. We got Orwell's 1984. Everybody knows this novel as well. Basically about a futuristic society um, where Big Brother rules all, and he watches over all his people, and you have to behave in a certain way. Da, 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 it's Orwell's fictional account of what totalitarianism totalitarianism would look like in the future once technology kind of kicks in gear, right? So it's quite a good book. Other than Brave New World, it's probably my favorite dystopian novel. Brave New World would be number one. Probably The Handmaid's Tale would be maybe third. We would be another one that would be there. And then we have Catcher in the Rye, which I've spoken about numerous times. Holden Caulfield is like the poster child of the angst teenage angst, and this book is all about him wandering around New York um, after being expelled. Was he expelled from school? Anyways, he has this attitude that everything is shit, and adults are hypocrites and mean spirited and so on and so forth. It's pretty. It's still read by thousands of people. So it sells so easily, and it was written back in the 1950s or whatever, right? So I took it in school actually when I was in school in the 70s, right? So all right, what else do we have? All right, let's stop the books. Let's do a couple of movies. But let's do this CD first. All right, so this is a CD that doesn't have any. Anyways, you got to look inside to see what it is, and it's okay. So this is a Sigur Ross. Ross. Uh, can't say an album because it's a single. Okay, and it's basically an extremely hard to find um, single. So when I found it in a thrift store, I picked it up right away. Right. So um, it's basically Sagluria. Yeah. Okay. They're Icelandic and they're speaking and writing in the Icelandic language, which I have no clue about. Right. So, but these guys are internationally famous. If you have not heard them, they're basically Iceland's greatest band. I would say greatest musical group. If it wasn't for Bjork would be up there with them as well, right? So, but basically they're kind of like ambient electronic guitar music. So when you put the music on, it doesn't matter what language they're speaking because it's the music that you're listening to, not really the lyrics when there are lyrics. Sometimes those lyrics go long periods of time without hearing any voices at all, right? So it's extremely beautiful music, and this this single has like four songs on it, four or five songs on it, and a DVD of three of those songs of them playing live. So it's kind of cool. So I picked it up. All right, so that's Sigur Ross, the only CD I have. All right, let's do a couple of movies. All right, so back in the 70s, I watched a Dustin Hoffman film. Now, Dustin Hoffman is an extremely good actor all the way back to when he was like early 20s, teenage years, back with, what's that? The Graduate, with is it Natalie Wood? Yeah, she plays like Mrs. Robinson in it back then. But you had like Straw Dogs was another one. That's in the Criterion Collection. That's an extremely good film. You see a transition of Dustin Hoffman from a very passive, um, easygoing writer type, pacifist kind of type, to the end of that film being like a fucking monster. I mean, like, he just loses it, right? So, anyways, it's an extremely powerful uh, film, but personally for me, it's not his best film. His best film is this film, and I finally found it, although it's on DVD. All right, so extremely difficult to find this film. At least for me, it was. I've been collecting movies for years now, and I have not come across it until today, and I found this today. Now, this film is basically it's called Marathon Man, all right, and it's directed by who directed this? John Schlesinger. John Schlesinger. Um, and basically, Dustin Hoffman is a Jewish guy who has an older brother, and the reason why it's called Marathon Man is because he runs marathons, right? So, um, and so he's in. I think this takes place. Does this take place in New York? Anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But basically, this is about uh, Nazi diamonds. All right, so stolen in World War II. Right. So basically, this is after World War II. This is in the the 19 was it the 70s? I think it might be in the 70s. This takes place. Anyways, he his Dustin Hoffman plays Babe, and he's a marathon runner. Anyway, so his brother gets involved with Christopher Plummer. Is it Christopher Plummer that plays that? No, Laurence Olivier. Laurence Olivier, who's a Nazi who's escaped punishment. All right, so um, and he has a whole stock of diamonds that he stole from Jewish people during World War II. Right, and what he's trying to do is he's trying to bring them into the United States. All right, so and he's using Babe's brother, older brother, to broker this movement of these diamonds. So the problem is that his brother ends up getting killed, and now Laurence Olivier is suspicious on whether he can bring them. He needs to bring those diamonds in, but he doesn't know whether it's okay to do it. So what he does is he thinks Babe and his older brother are very close, and they were collaborating in this thing. But Dustin Hoffman or Babe doesn't have any idea about it at all. Anyways, so so he ends up kidnapping him, and anyways, it goes from there, and it's an extremely interesting film. Um, but what makes it so there are certain films that will have certain scenes in them that are so powerful that if you watch that film, you will never forget those scenes. Some of those scenes for me would be like, the Deer Hunter, the Russian roulette scene with Christopher Walken and uh, Robert De Niro, as such, where they're playing Russian roulette in a Vietnamese prison camp or whatever. That was extremely powerful. The Ned Beatty "Squeak Like a Pig" um, scene in Deliverance. I don't. That was pretty brutal. Um, the rape scene in Irreversible, the Gaspar Noé film, the rape scene in the it's not in a subway, but it's in a hallway, outdoor hallway. But Gaspar Noé film that was pretty like, yeah, you don't forget that shit. And what else would be good? Oh, when Jack Nicholson takes an axe to the bathroom door to get after his wife in The Shining is another one, or um, Private Piles. This is my gun. Um, in when he was in the bathroom in Full Metal Jacket. That's another one. But there's a whole bunch of them that you end up. Those are the ones just are popping into my head. Well, this movie has um, the dentist scene because the Nazi Laurence Olivier Nazi his profession is dentistry. He's actually a dentist, right? So what he was doing in World War II was removing all the gold and diamonds, everything out of Jewish and gypsy teeth before they went to the gas chamber or whatever, right? So he so he decides he's going to find out from Babe whether it's safe to bring in the diamonds, and he tortures him basically using dental instruments. And I would highly suggest that if you do watch that scene, uh, don't have a fear of dentistry. If you have a fear of dentistry before watching that scene, I would not watch that scene. If you don't have a fear, this may create a fear of dentists. You know what I mean? I mean, people are fearful of dentists already because there's nothing more painful than you know, a toothache or you know, prying in with a pick into your tooth, right? Extremely painful, and that's what happens to Dustin Hoffman in this film. Now, I don't know, but when I originally watched this film back in the day, back in the 70s, late 70s, early 80s, when I watched it, that scene was extremely brutal. All right, and then I watched this film like maybe a decade ago again. Um, and that scene didn't that scene didn't seem as brutal as it did when I first watched it. So I don't know. I'm not 100% sure. Maybe you know, a movieologist or whatever, or a cinephile who knows more than me can leave a comment in the comments. But I think they cleaned up that scene a bit to make it less, you know, like cringe worthy. You know what I mean? Less. Oh, you know, you get that feeling where you have to look away or whatever, right? Um, because I think they may have cleaned. I don't know if they cleaned it up for the DVD or not, but when I watched it on TV, late night television or whatever, I think it was on the movie network. Anyways, um, yeah, it was pretty cringe. Not so much now. So, but even if they did change it a bit, that scene is still, yeah, you're gonna be like turning your face. All right, so I can't recommend. There are some films, like I said, that have those scenes in them, but there's, you know, you have all the, you know, the main films that everybody loves, you know, like you know, The Godfather or you know, The Usual American Beauty, The Usual Suspects, you know, all those really great films, you know, like E.T. or you name it, right? So, and then you have the films that kind of, they're not mainstream, but they're just not as popular as the other one, and people haven't seen them. You may mention the film, and a person might not know what you're talking about. Um, that's one of these films, and it's one of my all-time favorite films, along with some other ones like that would be maybe My Bodyguard. I don't know if you've ever seen that one. And would be another one. Gregory's Girl would be another one that it's my some of my all-time favorite films that are kind of like not really obscure, um, but a lot of people might not have heard of them. But anyways, this one, check this out if you have not seen it. All right, now we got um, Christopher Nolan's Tenet. I watched this. I don't remember it, so I think I'm overwhelmed with the Batman franchise with him, right? But I can't remember his other films as well because I watched Batman so many times, right? Especially the Heath Ledger second film, right? So, um, but that's Nolan film, and then we have My Son, What Have You Done? And this is a Werner Herzog film that I have not seen yet, so we'll see how good that one is. And then I found this one, which isn't super highly rated, but I always like to pick up anime when I find it, right? And this is based on a, you know, like almost like a Dungeons and Dragons game, isn't it? Like a Japanese uh, board game or whatever called Bayonetta, and this is Bayonetta Bloody Fate. All right, so I'll watch that, see how that is, and maybe I'll review it later, right? So we'll see how that movie is. Okay, so let's do a few more books. Okay, so I had a guy come over. This is the reason why I was able to buy a bunch of this stuff is because he came over and he bought a whole bunch of books, but he also brought me a bunch of books that he didn't want anymore, and a lot of them are the Oxford World Classics that I speak to you about. And I guess he went through you know, the Bronte sisters like one after another. The gentleman does have a bit of OCD. He tells me that himself. It's not like I have to infer it, right? So he had a whole bunch of Bronte's work. So you got Villette by Charlotte Bronte in the Oxford World's Classics. You have Anne Bronte's Agnes Grey. All right. Then you have Anne Bronte's The Tenant of Winfell Hall. All right. So basically, it looks like he's gone through all the Brontes, you know, all the 19th century novels. Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte as well. All right. And then he even got Elizabeth Gaskell's biography of Charlotte Bronte. All right. And read that. All right. So he was doing some Brontes, and then he also read Measure for Measure by William Shakespeare. I have not read this play, so maybe I'll read that before I sell it. And you got Samuel Richardson's Pamela. All right. And Charlotte Lennox, The Female Quixote. The Female Quixote. Um, I have not read it. So those are those ones. And then I found these ones. I found The Scarlet Letter. Now these Broadview editions, I found two Broadview editions. These are really good. They're a Canadian publisher, and they publish some more main. They're kind of like the Criterion Collection, but for books. In that they'll put out, let's say this one, The Scarlet Letter. They put out classic pieces of literature and maybe some nonfiction and some other things, right? But some of it's more mainstream, so that they know that they'll be able to sell it, and then they'll take some of that money and they'll publish some other stuff that's more obscure. So here's a perfect example. So The Scarlet Letter, it's one of the United States' greatest novels by Nathaniel Hawthorne. This one, House of the Seven Gables, he's up there with like William Faulkner and Ernest Hemingway and these guys, right? So this is basically about a woman who ends up giving birth. Now, this is back in the 1600s during the Puritan days, right? In Boston, right? So she's given birth um, to a girl uh, of unknown parentage. Nobody knows who the father is, right? But she's not married, or she is married, but her husband is dead or whatever, right? Or supposed to dead. He ends up coming back in the novel or whatever, right? But um, so she had sex out of wedlock and got pregnant and now is having a daughter. So she's shunned. She ends up in prison. And what she has to do is she has to wear an A for adultery. Um, so maybe her husband was, if her husband was, anyways, um, her husband isn't dead, but he was lost and he isn't around, but he ends up coming back. But anyway, so she has to do this in this society, and she's shunned by everybody, and so is her daughter, right? Um, so it's all about that Puritan type of thing, and Hawthorne jumps headfirst into that kind of thing, and tells the story of this woman and her daughter and all the BS that they go through because of this puritanical type of society that Boston was back in the 17th century, right? So that's The Scarlet Letter. So that's a more popular book. It's one of Hawthorne's and American novels' most popular books. All right, and so but then they end up putting out this, which is the Turkish Embassy Letters by Lady Mary Wortley Montagu. All right. Have you ever heard of this book? No, but what this book is her husband was like a diplomat, and he ends up in Turkey, and I think in Istanbul during the time of the Ottoman Empire before World War One, right? And she ends up being stationed there, and what she does is she ends up writing about her experiences living in Turkey in during the Ottoman Empire. So, about how women are treated. It's a Muslim world there, and all the differences between English life and Muslim life, right? So it's quite an interesting thing, especially if you're into comparative sociology, where you want to compare like one form of society to another. This would be pretty good because she's kind of like from the British upper class. Was British, right? She was British, upper class. I mean, her name is Lady, right? So she's got to be English. Upper class, and then how things go in a Muslim world, right? So it's quite interesting. And so this is something that's right up Broadview's alley, in that they really like to publish more obscure female, um, minority, non-white, let's say, uh, writers, right? So they get their due or whatever, right? So anytime you see Broadview, Broadview, it's going to be a good book, and the more obscure ones are sometimes the most interesting ones. So you get to like expand your knowledge of classic literature that maybe isn't, right in the main, the mainstream of literature over the centuries, right? So, all right. So that's those two. I think that's all the books. Uh, did I do the Heart of Darkness? No, I didn't. Right? Okay. So this is the Penguin Great books of the 20th century. So there's a whole group of these books that are, have that orange stripe and they're kind of green. Um, Penguin just puts out so many books. You ever notice that? Anyway, so these are really nice. They got that fold in, like it's like a faux hardcover. It's still a soft cover, but it's kind of got that dust jacket kind of thing going on there. But it isn't a dust jacket. It's actually just the cover of the book. So Heart of Darkness, I don't know. This is the book that Francis Ford Coppola um, used for his Apocalypse Now film, except he took uh, them out of the Congo and brought them into Vietnam, right? So, but basically, the stories still have a Kurtz in it. The stories are similar but not exact. One's in Vietnam, and the other one's in the deepest, darkest part of Africa, right? With this boat going down the river in the Congo to go search for Kurtz, and yeah, it gets pretty brutal. All right, so you haven't read this book. This is one of the great novellas. All right, and then you have my argument of probably one of the top 10 novels of all time. That's Kurt Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse Five. Basically, it's like an anti-war novel with slash science fiction elements and fantasy elements to it, where this guy ends up in I think it was Dresden, right? During the bombing of Dresden, he gets shell shocked, and then he wakes up and he actually gets kidnapped by aliens and brought to a different planet to be put on display in a zoo. Um, and then he ends up back on Earth, and you don't know whether that is truthful or that's like a figment of his imagination or what. But it's an extremely fun ride if you have not read Slaughterhouse Five. If you read it, you're going to love it. All right, it's up there with some of the greatest novels of all time. And I think that is all of the books. So let's get into the good stuff. All right, the good movie stuff. All right, so let's first go Point of No Return. Have you seen this film with Bridget Fonda? I extremely like this movie for two main reasons. Number one, well, three main reasons. If you've watched any of my videos, you know that I love like action films with a female lead. It's always like this tough guy that goes kicks ass, and so it's fun to see a woman take a lead in an action movie and go kick ass herself, right? So that's what this kind of is. Um, but this is basically an American copy of La Femme Nikita or Nikita, the French film by Luc Besson. Um, that one probably better than this one, but this one I really like because, well, the female lead, but the other one had the other female lead. The two other reasons I really like this film is because it introduced me to Nina Simone. All right, so she's the greatest jazz female jazz recording artist of all time is Nina Simone. If you haven't listened to Nina Simone and you like jazz, then you're way missing out. So you need to listen to some Nina Simone. All right, especially her first album. It escapes me. I'll put it up here. It's on this side. I usually put the thing, so I'll put it up here. It's like in a smoky jazz club. I can't remember the exact title of it. Lady Blue or anyways. So I'll put it up here, especially that one. Try that one, and if you like that one, man, you just opened up a whole world of Nina Simone. You're just gonna love it. Well, in this film, Bridget Fonda is confined to a room because she's a drug addict basically, and she ends up killing somebody, and they're going to put her to death. But then the government steps in and takes her out of that and trains her to be an assassin. She has no choice. She either dies or becomes an assassin for the government, right? So she becomes an assassin. While she's being trained to be an assassin and a lady, she has a bedroom, like a single room that she spends time in, and she likes to put on Nina Simone records to listen to Nina Simone, and so you hear a lot of Nina Simone music throughout the film, and it's really good. That's Point of No Return. Basically, who directed this one? John Badham directed this one. So I collect him actually. So I think he's the guy that did. Don't quote me if I'm wrong. Didn't he do Saturday Night Fever? I think he did Saturday Night Fever. John Badham. Yeah, he did Saturday Night Fever. That was the main film. Yeah, Saturday Night Fever and Point of No Return. All right, so that's Point of No Return on Blu-ray. I didn't have it on DVD, so or did I? No, I didn't. All right, next up is The Family. All right, with Robert De Niro and Michelle Pfeiffer. All right, this one is directed by Luc Besson. Speaking of Luc Besson, there we go. And we were just speaking of him with La Femme Nikita. So I have not seen this film yet, The Family. Um, so I think it's about a group of gangsters that end up turning state's evidence and going into witness protection, and how it's very difficult for them to do that, right? Because they're they're criminals because they want to be criminals, right? So, anyways, I think that's what this is about. Um, anyways, Besson, if you haven't watched his stuff, is well, he's got a lot of good movies. He even the ones that he helps. He's not the director of, but he helps. Like Bagne 13. Who directed that? Was it? It escapes me. But anyways, he's connected to a lot of French action films, right? And the ones that he directs are really good as well, right? So you got like his two best are Leon the Professional, the one about a hitman, all right, and Natalie Portman's in it. She's like a young teenager and she wants to learn how to be a hitman, and so and then of course La Femme Nikita about a drug addict who turned female assassin, right? So those are his two best films. All right, so that's that one. What's up next? We got Tom Cruise and Days of Thunder. This one is a Tony Scott film. I had it on I have it on DVD, but I didn't have it on Blu-ray, so I picked it up on Blu-ray, and it's basically Tom Cruise in a car, right? So you got like Top Gun with Tom Cruise in a a fighter jet, and in Days of Thunder you have Tom Cruise in a stock car, right? So racing around in a stock car. All right, and then we got Hereafter, Matt Damon, and Hereafter. This one, who directed this one? I think this is Adam McGoyan directed this one. Adam McGoyan, my vote for Canada's greatest director. He's Armenian, but he came to Canada and he's been directing in Canada and the United States ever since. His greatest film, well, he has a few of them. The Sweet Hereafter is really good. Felice's Journey is another one that's really good, but his best one is Exotica, which the Criterion has just put out in a Blu-ray edition of in the Criterion collection back in February, I think it was, right? I picked that one up, and I rarely ever pick up Criterion's new, because by the time I got that freaking film, it cost, well, it didn't cost me. It was a Christmas present or a birthday present. It was like $50 or $60, but it's well worth it. Exotica is the name of his best film. All right, so and then we got Midway, which is a Roland Emmerich film. Now, Roland Emmerich is always trashed, right? Saying, "Oh, films are bad." They're not bad, okay? People, they're not bad films. They're if it's like saying a B film is bad, but it's made in that way on purpose. I don't know if Emmerich is trying to make a B film that's an action film that's like a super great, visually awesome action film, but that's what he makes, and he makes a lot of them. A lot of them are I find are fun to watch, as long as you don't take them too seriously, right? So, and that this one is a perfect example of that. All right, so Midway. Next up is Killing Them Softly with Brad Pitt, uh, written and directed by Andrew Dominic. I have not watched this, but it's got good reviews, so I thought I'd pick it up and watch it. Then we got After the Sunset. And this one is directed by Brett Ratner, who I collect. I have this on DVD, but I didn't have it on Blu-ray. I haven't watched it in years, so I can't really tell you what it's about. And then we got Logan Lucky. I watched this recently, And it was fun seeing what's his name, Daniel Craig in a non, James Bond role. This is probably the first film I saw him um, not being James Bond. All right, I, I saw this one, and then I saw the one where he's a detective in that Knives Out. I think it was called Knives Out, wasn't it? That was a pretty good film as well. But so this one is directed by Steven Soderbergh. So pick that one up. All right, and then we got Arrival. All right. This is it's hard to see who directed this one. Darren Aronofsky. I can't tell. Anyways, I collect this director, whoever he is, but I haven't seen Arrival yet. Then we got the great Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Probably, both actors, both Robert Redford and Paul Newman's, you know, two of the greatest, actors of the '60s and '70s put together in one film, right? And it's quite a fun film to watch if you haven't seen it. And it is directed by George Roy Hill, right? Uh, you know, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Come on, you can't go wrong with that, right? All right, then we have Neighbors with Seth Rogen and Nicholas Stroller directed this one. Right? So I have not seen this one. Have you seen uh, this one? I'm going to watch it. We'll see. Spy Game with Robert Redford. This one's who's directed this one? Tony Scott's directed this one as well. All right, so I picked that one up. I have this one on DVD again, but not on Blu-ray. Most of the films I'm picking up now, uh, with rare exception, are Blu-rays to replace my DVDs, or sometimes 4Ks to replace my Blu-rays. Right? We got Tom Hanks and Captain Phillips, which I have on DVD again, right? And this one's directed by Paul Greengrass. All right, and I don't have it on Blu-ray, but now I do. Then we have Bridge of Spies. This is a Steven Spielberg film. Um, I don't know if I've seen this or not. You ever notice when you get older? I mean, if you are older, you may not be, but you've watched literally thousands and thousands of films, and sometimes the only time you remember whether you've watched that film is if you watch and you go, "Hey, I've seen this film before," but before that, it wouldn't occur to you that you've seen it or not, right? So it happens. And this one, I was really awesome, really uh, excited to get. This is Lou Reed's Berlin, a film by Julian Schnabel. All right, this is an artificial eye. Um, I collect the artificial eye. They're usually pretty good. So if you see that, you know, what do you call it, trademark or whatever, logo, um, pick it up. You can't go wrong with those films. And this one is basically about Lou Reed's album, Berlin, and the making of it, right? So I thought that would be pretty cool to watch. All right. And then I found Steelbook. I don't know how many copies of Pretty in Pink I have, but I found a really nice Steelbook of Pretty in Pink, um, still with its J card. All right, so that's kind of cool. So I picked it up. Uh, this is one of the iconic teen films from the 1980s, right? But my favorite is it's coming up of this type of film. But Molly Ringwald, Molly Ringwald, Molly, man, yeah, Molly Ringwald was huge back in the '80s. All right. Um, so it's a really nice steelbook. So I'll replace the Blu-ray that I have, and I'll get rid of the Blu-ray that I have, and now I'll have a steelbook. And I found this one also, which is will help me save some shelf space, that's for sure. And that's the Mel Brooks collection. All right. So the Mel Brooks, I don't know if you know Mel Brooks, big back in the '70s and '80s. He would do these spoof films. Like you would do you'd pick a genre and then you'd make fun of it. So like the Star Wars films or science fiction films. He did Spaceballs for the Western. He did Blazing Saddles for the history film. He did History of the World Part One. You know, for the horror one, he did Young Frankenstein, Gene Wilder, right? Anyway, so this is a collection of a bunch of his films. So the 12 Chairs, Blazing Saddles, Young Frankenstein, Silent Movie, High Anxiety, History of the World, Part one, To Be or Not to Be, Spaceballs, and Robin Hood Men in Tights, all in one package. So that's like 7 movies. So instead of having, let's say, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, instead of it being that thick on my shelf, it's that thick on my shelf. So it's good. So it's a way that you can save shelf space if you can find things at a reasonable cost of like a bunch of movies by a certain director. It's a great way to save space on your shelves. And if you haven't seen any Mel Brooks films, some of them are hit and miss. I saw A History of the World Part One in the theater, and I laughed my ass off at it. But then I watched Blazing Saddles, and I knew that was the film that was the best for uh, for Mel Brooks. That's his best film, is Blazing Saddles. You get these little scenes that just jump out at you from. So in, let's say, The History of the World, you'll have a scene. So what he does is he goes from the beginning of time up into, I can't remember when it ended, but there was supposed to be a part two that would continue history forward. Anyway, so there's like this horse that's in one period of time, and then they move like 200 years later, where the horse would be dead or whatever, and then he appears in that period of time. So that's kind of funny. And you have a uh, uh, you ever hear the song Funky Town? Won't you take me to Funky Town? Well, you have a section in it where you have a cool looking dude with a big, huge ghetto blaster on his ear walk through, like, it's like Egyptian times, or I can't remember. It's been a while since I've seen the film, where he's walking through with a big ghetto blaster, or, like a portable stereo on his arm, as they did back in the 80s. And he's playing Funky Town on, and he walks through. Obviously at that period of time in history, there were no electronics. I mean, there was no electricity or anything, right? So that was kind of funny as well. But like in Spaceballs, there's she gives good helmet. When that's one of the famous sayings from that film. And the Blazing Saddles, where um, the sheriff shows up and he's a black guy, and they're going, "The sheriff's a nit, the sheriff's a nit," and then they cut to a different scene so you can't hear the whole thing. And then they're gonna lynch him, and then so what does he do? He pulls out his gun and he points it at himself and he says, "Hey, get back," or that gets it. Uh, I would believe him, everybody. I would believe him. Get back. Right? It's just stupid, right? But it's hilariously stupid. Anyways, I laughed. I almost pissed myself with that section of that film, and that sold me on Mel Brooks and Blazing Saddles as being his best movie. Right? All right. So we're still going. All right. So here's another steelbook of a John Hughes film. Right? Well, John Hughes produced this film. It was directed by Howard Deutsch. Right? Deutsch. Right? This is my all-time favorite teen film. Right? I like Porky's as an all-time comedy, but romantic comedy for teens. Like Pretty in Pink and the other ones like that were big in the 80s. This is my all-time favorite. Some Kind of Wonderful, starring Eric Stoltz and Canadian Mary Stuart, Leah Thompson, sorry, and Mary Stuart Masterson. Basically, he's a working class dude. His father's a working class dude, and he's saving up for college because he'll be the first person in that family to go to college. But he doesn't really want to go to college. What he wants to do is take all the money that he's saving for college by working after school in a garage and a gas station. Um, his father's getting him to, invest in T-bills and stuff like that, and create wealth for him to go to school when he finishes high school, to go to college, because nobody's gone to college, right? In his family. So, but he takes that money, and he's always shit on because he's a poor guy in school by all the rich people or whatever, right? And there's a girl who is Leah Thompson, her, and now she's also from that side of the tracks, but because of her beauty, she ends up getting into the in crowd of all the rich, good-looking girls, right? And so she hangs out with them, even though she's, kind of on the other side of the tracks, but they kind of allow her in because she's good looking or whatever, right? And anyway, so he decides to take the money that he's saving up for college, or father wants him to save for college, and he takes her out on a date to prove that he's worth just as much as any other rich guy or whatever, right? So, anyways, it's quite an impressive film, and Mary Stuart Masterson plays his best friend. She's like comes from a broken home. The only two things she likes in the world is him and her drums because she plays the drums. Anyways, it's uh, quite a good film. I like the message of the film. It doesn't matter where you come from. If you're determined, you'll get where you want. Um, that kind of message. Uh, and you even get a what's his name in it? Who plays a tough kid, Elias Cotis, the Canadian Elias Cotis. He was also in. He was the DJ in Exotica, the Adam McGowan film that I was speaking about earlier. He's the DJ, and he's a Canadian guy, and he plays, the tough, leather jacket wearing skinhead type of guy in the school in this film, right? So, um, if you haven't seen it, watch it. I don't know. You may not think it is as great as I do, but I think it's one of the great films from the '80s. That one and My Bodyguard I really enjoyed as well. All right. So then I found this one as well, which is going to save me a lot more space as well. And that's Michael Bay's 5 films on Blu-ray of the Transformer films. I don't think these films are great, but I do collect Michael Bay mostly for a couple of his films like The Rock and The Island. I really like The Island. If you haven't seen that film, I really like The Island. So when I collect a few of a of a director, I want to get all of his films, and then you can watch them from beginning to end, then you can judge them properly. But he really brutalized this collection. So I could have picked these all up an individual. They're very easy to find, all the different ones. And there is actually a set now that includes Bumblebee with this, so I may look for that and replace it. There's the Bumblebee movie. So this has the original 5 Transformers movies, but there's a Bumblebee movie that's missing from this one. So, and they do have a package where they have a Bumblebee in it. I think it's a 4K edition of it. But this will do for now because I'll be able to take off all the other Blu-rays and DVDs that I have of this and just have this one this thick on my shelf to save a bunch of shelf space. So uh, that was cool. I found that for a cheap price, and I also found this from the same guy for a cheap price as well. And that's the 4 film original Batman series. Batman, Batman Returns, Batman and Robin. What was the other one? Batman Forever. Um, unless you were living back in the '80s when Batman came out, you just don't know the hype of that film. I mean, that film was ridiculous. Every second person had a Batman T-shirt on, right? Because the only Batman, everybody is a big fan of Batman. You collect the comics, you read the comics and everything, and the only thing you really had to watch for Batman was, the occasional cartoon, Super Friends or stuff like that, where he's with, all the other DC, and you get an animated series here or there of Batman, but no live stuff except for the really old who played West. What's his first name? Who played Batman on TV back in what was it, the early '60s? The one that was almost like cartoon-like, where they'd get into a fight, and it's a live action, and it punch, and he'd hit the Joker, and then you get a big screen cartoon thing that says "pow" on it, right? Um, it was quite fun to watch, but there was never any films of Batman until Tim Burton came along and decided to make the Batman movie with I can't remember who wrote the film, but anyways, Prince did the soundtrack, which was a very good soundtrack as well, and Jack Nicholson played the Joker, which everybody got super excited for. Yeah, he's perfect for the Joker, right? And Michael Keaton. People were a bit nervous about Michael Keaton was Michael Keaton, right? If I remember correctly, Michael Keaton played the Batman, and he was up to that time he was mostly known for his comedy stuff rather than his serious stuff. Although if you ever watch Pacific Heights, you'll never doubt his chops when it comes to drama or horror or whatever, right? So and he did a great job in Batman. So Batman, that was like a huge hit. I mean, made a ton of money. The marketing, it was awesome. Everybody was talking about that film. It was like was like a phenomenon in itself. How excited everybody was. I mean, when people went and saw Star Wars back in '77, when they first watched it, I mean, when George Lucas came out with that film, everybody was like, because there wasn't all that many like really great sci-fi action films, right? So this one looked like an amazing one, and everybody went to the theater in droves back in '77 to watch Star Wars, and they went back numerous times afterwards to see it again and again and again and again, right? I must have seen that film like 4 times in the theater, right? Um, I think the only other film that I saw more than Star Wars, the original one, in the theater, spent my money on, was Grease, and I went to see that with my sister so many times it was ridiculous. But it's such a fun film. Grease was back then, right? So, um, but anyway, so when Batman came out, oh man, it was just nuts. It was nuts the amount of excitement around that movie. You don't get that anymore. You don't get that excitement anymore with film, right? With Netflix and everything else, where you can watch films at home. I mean, this is like people were still going to the theater in droves rather than staying at home and watching it on their TV on VHS or whatever, right? So people were going uh, to the theaters in droves to watch Batman. I mean, I went a couple of times myself. I thought it was a really good film. Later on, they kind of went downhill as the other films came, and Batman and Robin was Chris O'Donnell as Robin. It's a pretty brutal film, but anyways, overall the franchise is good, and I found this for a really cheap price, all 4 of the films in one small Blu-ray package, so I can get rid of the other ones. So that's kind of cool. All right, then I found this Oliver Stone film about World Trade Center, about the airplanes going into the World Trade Center, and Nicolas Cage plays the main guy. He's like a fireman that goes in to the World Trade Center. Um, it's interesting how American filmmakers will take tragedies and not even just American film, just filmmakers in general will take tragedies and fictionalize them for the screen. I'm not sure why they do that rather than just leave it alone, but sometimes it makes for some great films. Other times it does not. And then I found this one, a nice 4K edition of Aladdin. Um, it's not my favorite Disney movie, but um, I collect all the Disney films, the classic cartoon films, animation films from Disney in Blu-ray or above, right? So when I found this one in Blu-ray and 4K, I picked it up. All right, so I'm gonna watch that and see how that is on a 4K cut. All right, and then we have a new copy of Bennett Miller's Moneyball, which is basically Brad Pitt and what's his name, the larger guy. Is it Philip Seymour Hoffman? Or is it Philip Seymour Hoffman? Um, how they're managing a baseball team and budgeting and everything. So it was pretty fun to watch if you like baseball. I don't know how much you would like it if you don't like baseball, but anyway. And then I found this one, which the song remains the same, which is one of Led Zeppelin's few really good live albums. All right, and this is the Blu-ray version of the actual concert that the album was made off of. So you get to see the live concert of the song remains the same. So I picked that one up. And last but not least, I think that's everything. Is is this Eddie Murphy's best film, or do you think it's 48 Hours? It's either 48 Hours of this film, which is Eddie Murphy's best film. But both times he plays a smart aleck cop. No, actually, I'm lying. In 48 Hours, he plays a smart aleck criminal. In Beverly Hills Cop, he plays a smart aleck cop. All right, so it's quite fun how he makes fun of the Beverly Hills Police Department because they're all, like really nice guys because there's not much crime in Beverly Hills, and he's coming from Detroit or Chicago or wherever, New York or wherever he is. Like he's a hard-nosed criminal, hard-nosed cop or whatever, right? So um, it's quite funny how he makes fun of them on screen, but that's what Eddie Murphy did back in the day with, Delirious and Raw and all those other stuff that he did back in the day before he ended up starting to do some really stupid shit, kids movies and stuff. I'm not sure why he went in that direction. But anyways, so that's everything. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, leave me a thumbs up. Think about subscribing. This is what I do a lot. I think the next video, I'm also going through all my library, so those videos are probably the most popular out of all the videos I do, which is me just showing the films in my library. So it's kind of interesting. Um, and I think I might do what are the greatest films in each genre as a break from doing the exact same type of um, video all the time. What I think are the greatest films of each genre, kind of thing. Maybe I'll do that. I don't know. I'm thinking about it in my head. Anyways, I'm talking out loud. So this video is long enough, right? So you have a great day, and like I said, thumbs up, subscribe, and I'll talk to you in my next video. And bye for now.